The office felt like it had suddenly turned upside down. Jonathan Kincaid leaned casually against a mahogany conference table, his Italian suit perfectly pressed, his Rolex catching the afternoon light. That smirk, God, that smirk, was sharp enough to cut glass. "Nolan," he said, his voice smooth as silk and cold as a blade. "You're fired. Effective immediately. Lila will take your place." Laughter rippled through the office like jagged knives. Sharp, calculated, cruel. My stomach sank. My hand shook against the leather armrest, trembling with a fury I couldn't yet name. I could feel my chest tightening with every cruel second, every humiliating heartbeat. Lila, his golden little favorite, the one who'd spent the last 3 years climbing his ladder of favor, whispered something that made his lips curl in amusement. She didn't even have the decency to hide her triumph. Her manicured fingers brushed his shoulder, intimate and possessive. My fingers dug into the edge of the table. But I didn't move, couldn't move. I was frozen, humiliated, exposed, a spectacle in front of everyone I had trusted and worked with for 8 years. I felt like it pierced straight through my skin, through my soul. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make him feel even a fraction of betrayal that was currently tearing through my chest. But all I could do was swallow the humiliation. "You've become expendable, Nolan," Jonathan continued, circling the table like a predator who'd already won. "Lila has fresh ideas. She understands this company's future in a way you simply don't. Nothing personal. Just business. Nothing personal." I watched him reach for his coffee, dismissing me with that gesture alone. And I noticed something in that moment, something crucial. His left hand trembled slightly as he lifted the cup. His jaw clenched. Beneath all that arrogance, all that calculated cruelty, there was fear. He wasn't as untouchable as he pretended to be. "Of course," I heard myself say, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. "I'll clear my desk." As I stood to leave, Jonathan's expression shifted. He'd expected anger, tears, a dramatic exit. Instead, he got ice. He got calm. And for just a fraction of a second, I saw uncertainty flicker across his face. I wouldn't let him see me break. I walked out of that conference room with my head high. Though my body felt like lead, heavy with disbelief, the world had shifted beneath me, and the office that had once felt like home now felt like a tomb. Behind me, I heard Lila laugh, that brittle, false sound she perfected over years of playing Jonathan's game. I rode the elevator down in suffocating silence, watching the numbers descend. 40 stories, 40 floors between me and everything I had built. The reflecting steel walls showed me a man I barely recognized, hollow-eyed, defeated, broken. But not defeated, never defeated. Something deep inside me clenched with quiet, seething anger. Not rage, not yet. Just a fire, slow, precise, and growing. A fire that would burn with absolute clarity. Jonathan thought he had won. He thought I would slink away in humiliation, find some lesser job, fade into obscurity. He had no idea what was about to happen. He had no idea that I'd already made my move 3 months ago. My name is Nolan Prescott, and I'm going to tell you something. I spent 8 years building my reputation at Kincaid Industries, sacrificing everything. Late nights that turned into early mornings. Family dinners I missed. My sister's wedding I was too busy. My father's funeral. I worked through it. My health crumbled. My relationships dissolved, and my peace became a luxury I couldn't afford. And for what? For a man who was nothing but a manipulative narcissist with an Ivy League degree and a trust fund that had funded his first venture. Jonathan thrived on seeing others falter while he grinned, smug and untouchable. He'd built his empire on the backs of brilliant people. People he then systematically destroyed when they became threats. I'd watched him do it to Marcus Chun, our CFO of 6 years, a man with a PhD from Stanford. One day, Marcus was essential. The next, he was not aligned with our vision. Jonathan destroyed his reputation, and within 6 months, Marcus had a stroke. He was only 43. Jonathan had rewarded sycophants like Lila, the perfect office darling who smiled and nodded while climbing his ladder of favor, all while pretending to care about competence or loyalty. She was beautiful, compliant, and utterly mediocre. But mediocrity was exactly what Jonathan wanted. Mediocrity couldn't challenge him. I had documented everything, every slight, every humiliation, every stolen idea, and there were dozens. I'd kept it hidden in a black notebook, one no one knew about. For years, I'd written down every cruel word Jonathan had uttered, every time Lila stole credit for my work, every promotion denied to deserving people, every snide remark at the quarterly meetings where he publicly demeaned employees for sport. Each entry burned in my memory, a ledger of injustice. But I hadn't been idle. No, while everyone else at the company played politics and climbed Jonathan's twisted hierarchy, I'd been planning. Quietly, methodically, with a precision that would make a chess grandmaster proud. 6 months before that terrible conference room scene, I'd begun my real work. I started by reaching out to 5 people. People Jonathan had wronged. People he'd discarded. Marcus Chun, who'd recovered from his stroke and was running a small consulting firm. Sarah Mitchell, our former VP of Operations, who'd been forced out after refusing Jonathan's advances. David Park, a board member who'd privately expressed concerns about Jonathan's ethical practices. Elena Vasquez, our top data scientist, who Jonathan was actively trying to push out. And Robert Chun, Marcus's brother and a venture capitalist with serious money. I met with each of them separately, carefully, never at the office. Coffee shops, quiet restaurants, late-night phone calls. I have a plan, I told them, but I need your help, and I need your absolute discretion. What I revealed to them was this. I discovered that Jonathan's financial practices were deeply unethical. Accounting irregularities, hidden offshore accounts, falsified reports to investors. Nothing that would hold up in court yet. Jonathan was too smart for that. But I'd been gathering documentation for 18 months. Digital records, emails, contracts. More importantly, I discovered something else. Jonathan's company was worth considerably more than its current valuation, precisely because Jonathan had been systematically suppressing its value to manipulate stock prices for personal profit. We can acquire it, I explained to Robert over coffee in a nondescript cafe in Brooklyn, below market value, below what it's actually worth. And when we do, we fix the problems Jonathan created. We rebuild the company. We expose him. And we do it legally, completely legally. Robert had leaned back, studying me with sharp eyes. You're talking about hostile takeover territory. That's complicated. Nolan, that's expensive. I have savings, I said quietly. $2.3 million. I've been investing conservatively for 8 years. I can put in $500,000 as seed capital. I need investors willing to put in the rest. Another $3 million should do it, enough to acquire a controlling stake when the moment is right. And when will that moment be? Elena asked when I met with her the following week. When Jonathan makes his biggest mistake, I said, which he will. He always does. His arrogance is his weakness. He'll underestimate me, and in that underestimation, he'll expose himself. What I didn't tell them, what I hadn't told anyone, was exactly how deep my plan went. For the past 8 months, I've been quietly acquiring shares in Kincaid Industries through a shell company registered in Delaware. A fraction here, a percentage there, always through different brokers, always obscured through legal but indirect channels. My name never appeared on a single document. I'd liquidated every non-essential investment. I'd taken a personal loan against my apartment. I'd called in favors from a former roommate who was now a corporate attorney. Piece by piece, I'd accumulated 8% of the company's shares. Enough to matter. Not enough to trigger mandatory disclosure requirements. At least not yet. And I'd been watching. Always watching. I'd documented Jonathan's affair with Lila. I'd photographed the offshore bank statements that had accidentally been left on the company printer, a careless mistake by his personal assistant who, unbeknownst to Jonathan, had been providing me with information for 6 months. I'd obtained copies of falsified expense reports, inflated invoices to shell companies Jonathan owned, and communication between Jonathan and board members where he discussed manipulating stock prices. I had ammunition. I just needed the right moment to use it. That evening after my firing, I sat in my small apartment in Park Slope, the walls lined with books and empty coffee cups, and I pulled out my black notebook. I traced my finger over 18 months of meticulously documented evidence. Every cruel word, every stolen idea, every moment of humiliation. And then I opened my laptop. The shell company I created, Prescott Capital Ventures, had just been transferred an additional 4% of Kincaid Industries stock. I watched the transaction clear on my screen. 12% now. Getting close. I had purchased the shares through a series of transactions so convoluted that even a forensic accountant would need weeks to trace them back to me. But the clock was ticking. Within 48 hours, I would have to file disclosure forms with the SEC. Once I crossed 13%, it became public record. Jonathan would know. That was fine. That was part of the plan. I made a phone call to Robertson. "It's time," I said simply. "Activate the investor group. I need the remaining capital transferred within 48 hours. We're going to make our move." "Are you sure about this?" Robert asked. There was worry in his voice. "Once this starts, there's no stopping it. Nolan, this is going to be brutal." "I'm sure," I said, more sure than I've ever been about anything. The next morning, I made an anonymous call to the SEC's hotline, reporting financial irregularities at Kincaid Industries. I provided documentation. Not everything, just enough to start an investigation, just enough to make Jonathan nervous. Within hours, the SEC contacted the company's board. An inquiry was initiated. Jonathan would find out by end of business. I watched from my apartment as the first domino fell. My phone rang at 3:47 p.m. It was David Park, the board member. "Nolan, it's David. I don't know how you did this, but the SEC just contacted us, and I just received notice that Prescott Capital Ventures is now disclosing a 13.2% stake in the company. The other board members, we didn't see this coming." "I know you didn't," I said calmly. "Neither did Jonathan." "Tell me, how is he taking it?" "He's panicking," David said, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. The satisfaction of a man who'd been waiting for this moment. He called an emergency board meeting. He's demanding we investigate who's behind Prescott Capital. He's threatening legal action. He's completely unraveling. "Good," I said. "Here's what happens next. In the next 48 hours, I'm acquiring an additional 2% through legitimate market purchases. That will bring my stake to 15.2%. At that point, I'm going to present the board with evidence, documentation of Jonathan's financial mismanagement, his affair, his falsified reports, everything. And I'm going to ask for his removal as CEO." There was a long silence on the line. "Nolan," David said slowly, "is this legal?" "Completely," I assured him. "Every share was purchased through proper channels. Every disclosure is accurate, and every piece of evidence is admissible. Jonathan has been committing fraud for years. The only reason he wasn't caught is because he had controlled the board. That's about to change." The next 72 hours were chaos inside Kincaid Industries. Jonathan did exactly what I predicted. He panicked. He tried to consolidate power, to rally the board, to find allies. He called in favors. He threatened. He cajoled. He even tried to have Prescott Capital investigated as a potentially hostile foreign entity, a desperate move that went nowhere. I watched it all from my apartment, checking news feeds, receiving updates from my allies on the inside. And then something beautiful happened. Lila, terrified of what was about to unfold, decided to save herself. She went aboard with documentation of Jonathan's affair, his emotional abuse toward employees, his sexual harassment. She provided emails. She provided witnesses. Suddenly, Jonathan wasn't just facing financial fraud charges. He was facing potential sexual harassment lawsuits. His entire world was collapsing, and he still didn't know I was behind it. On day 4, I walked into the office for the first time since my firing. I wasn't trying to sneak in. I walked to the front door like I owned the place, because soon I would. The receptionist, Maria, who'd always been kind to me, did a double take. "Mr. Prescott?" I thought you weren't working here anymore. I'm back for a meeting, I said with a slight smile. Board meeting. They're expecting me. The elevator ride up felt like an ascension, like a resurrection. The boardroom on the 40th floor was in chaos when I arrived. Jonathan was there, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His suit was wrinkled, his tie loosened. Beside him, Lila sat rigid, her face pale. Around the table, the board members looked shell-shocked. David Park stood as I entered. Nolan, thank you for coming. Everyone, this is Nolan Prescott. He's the principal behind Prescott Capital Ventures. Jonathan's face went white. His hand started shaking. Actually shaking. You, he breathed. You did this. Yes, I said calmly, taking a seat at the head of the table, the seat Jonathan had occupied for 10 years. I did, and I have documentation to present that will explain everything. What followed was 2 hours of evidence, revelation, and reckoning. I presented proof of Jonathan's offshore accounts. I showed financial records that demonstrated stock price manipulation. I provided copies of falsified expense reports. I revealed the affair with Lila, along with evidence of preferential treatment given to her despite her documented incompetence. I showed emails where Jonathan had discussed deliberately sabotaging promising young employees because he feared competition. I presented testimony from 3 former employees, Marcus, Sarah, and Elena, who described emotional abuse, sexual harassment, and systematic career destruction. Most damaging of all, I presented evidence that Jonathan had been slowly looting the company's pension fund through shell company transactions. That made this criminal, not just unethical. By the time I finished, there was silence in that room. I am here today, I said, my voice steady and calm, as a principal shareholder Kincaid Industries with 15.2% of company stock. I am also here on behalf of Investor Group, led by venture capitalist Robert Chin, which collectively holds an additional 18% stake. Together, we control 33.2% of this company. I paused, letting that sink in. Jonathan Kincaid has been removed from his position of CEO effective immediately. This board is hereby dissolving his employment contract. He is entitled to severance per his agreement, approximately $2.1 million. His stock options are being converted to cash value, per the terms of his contract, which amounts to $3.4 million. He is being removed from the board of directors, and all of this documentation is being forwarded to the SEC and the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. Jonathan stood up. His face was mottled with rage. You can't do this. I built this company. You nothing. You spent your entire career following my orders. Sit down, David Park said quietly, and his voice held such authority that Jonathan actually sat. Security, David continued, and 2 security officers appeared in the doorway. They'd been waiting in the hall. I realized this had all been coordinated. Please escort Mr. Kincaid from the building. His access is terminated. Jonathan's face crumpled. For just a moment, I saw beneath the arrogance, beneath the cruelty. I saw a man who'd built his entire identity on dominating others, and who now faced the loss of that power. I saw fear. Real, genuine fear. He looked at me as the security officers approached him, and I saw a question in his eyes. How did I not see this coming? The answer was simple. He'd never really seen me at all. Lila was offered choice. Resign quietly with a severance package and an NDA, or face potential legal charges related to her participation in Jonathan's schemes. She chose to resign. Within a week, she'd moved to California and started a new life. I received word through mutual acquaintances that she'd taken a position at a tech startup working in recruitment. She was gone, and she would never work in a position of authority again. Her reputation had been thoroughly destroyed. Jonathan, meanwhile, faced a criminal investigation. The SEC fraud charges were serious. The financial crimes were serious. But the sexual harassment allegations were what truly devastated him. By the time trial started, 3 more women had come forward. His wife had filed for divorce. His children had distanced themselves from him. The Manhattan District Attorney eventually secured a conviction on 3 counts of fraud and 1 count of embezzlement. Jonathan Kincaid received 7 years in federal prison. He'd had access to the best lawyers money could buy, but money couldn't save him. The evidence was too substantial, the crimes too egregious. As for me, I became CEO of Kincaid Industries, which we immediately renamed Prescott Industries. The first thing I did was establish new ethical guidelines and whistleblower protections. I rehired Marcus Chun as CFO. He was brilliant, and his previous firing had been a crime. I promoted Elena Vasquez to Chief Technology Officer, a position she deserved 3 years earlier. I implemented profit sharing for all employees. I raised salaries by 20% across the board. I established a scholarship fund in the name of employees' children, in memory of what my colleagues had lost in pursuit of working under Jonathan's regime. The company thrived. Within 3 years, our stock value had tripled. We were featured in Forbes as one of the most ethical tech companies in America. We won industry awards for workplace culture. Talented people wanted to work for us, not out of fear, but out of genuine respect. I had transformed the company from a monument to one man's narcissism into something that actually mattered. 6 months after taking over, I received a visitor at my office. It was Sarah Mitchell, the former VP of Operations who'd been forced out after refusing Jonathan's advances. She walked in with a coffee. She still remembered that I took it black with 1 sugar. And she smiled. "I wanted to see it," she said, looking around the renovated offices. The place he destroyed. The place he rebuilt. I wanted to see what victory looks like. We sat together in my office, looking out over Manhattan, and we didn't talk about Jonathan or revenge or vindication. We talked about the future, about the projects Sarah was planning to launch, about the employees we'd just hired, about the good work that was ahead of us. "He tried to destroy you," Sarah said eventually, "and instead he gave you the motivation to build something infinitely better than anything he could have ever created." The black notebook still sits in my office, in a locked drawer. I open it occasionally, reading through the entries I'd made during those dark years. But I don't feel anger when I read them anymore. I feel gratitude. Gratitude for the pain that had refined me. Gratitude for the humiliation that had taught me patience. Gratitude for betrayal that had shown me exactly who I needed to become. Jonathan Kincaid is currently serving his sentence at a federal penitentiary upstate. He's 52 years old. According to mutual acquaintances, he's become a more humble man. Prison will do that to you. I don't wish him harm. I don't hate him. I've moved beyond that. What I've learned, what I want to tell you if you're reading this and you're currently suffering under the weight of someone else's cruelty, is this. Revenge is not a dish best served cold. Revenge is a dish best served with patience, with intelligence, with strategy. Impulsive rage destroys you. Calculated precision destroys your enemies. Every late night I'd worked, every dinner I'd missed, every moment of humiliation I'd endured, it had all been preparation for this moment. Not the moment of Jonathan's downfall, but the moment of my own resurrection. I had survived. More than survived. I had transformed. I walk into Prescott Industries every morning and I see the changes we've made. I see happy employees. I see ethical practices. I see a company that's genuinely trying to make the world a little better. That is my revenge. That is my victory. Not the destruction of Jonathan Kincaid. Anyone with money and power can destroy someone weaker. But the creation of something beautiful from the ashes of something corrupt. That took intelligence. That took patience. That took character. And on my office wall, I've had framed a quote by Maya Angelou. There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. My story has been told. And it matters. Because somewhere right now, someone is sitting in a conference room, being fired by a boss who thinks they've won. Someone is riding an elevator down, their entire world shattered. Someone is feeling the hollow ache, that seething anger, that whisper of a voice saying, "Not yet. This isn't over." To that person, I say this. It's not over. It's just beginning. And if you have the patience, the intelligence, and the courage to play the long game, you will win. Not through anger, not through rage, but through becoming someone so capable, so ethical, so undeniably excellent that your success becomes its own form of justice. I got fired, but I already own the company. And more than that, I already own my future. I spent 8 years believing Jonathan's seating chart define my worth. Silence became my weapon. Patience became my power. Respect is non-negotiable, earned to becoming undeniable, never through begging. If you've been gaslit into invisibility, your boundaries don't make you weak. They make you extraordinary. The revolution happens when you decide someone else's narrative isn't your truth. I transformed humiliation into intelligence, pain into purpose. Your silence isn't powerlessness. It's preparation. One day, they'll wonder how they missed you. Subscribe for stories about reclaiming power and turning vindication into victory. Your worth was never in question. It was only waiting to be remembered. This is how the extraordinary are born.